I had way too much fun putting this all together, and even though I don't think it's actually required in lieu of those speaker notes, I decided to just record myself teaching over the slides. I felt like the overall product might be better. You would enjoy it a little bit more going through the project, and I put a lot of time into this, probably too much, honestly, as a little bit of a passion project. I do help coach high school basketball in Indiana. I have some roots with family members and stuff to like Beech Grove High School inside the city of Indianapolis, so I was really into this, and I wanted to go through it hopefully in under 20 minutes, so I hit that 15 to 20 mark with Indiana high school basketball. So earliest beginnings, so before even Indiana stuff, Dr. James Naismith, of course, invented the sport or concept of basketball at the end of the 1800s in Springfield, Massachusetts, as a new way of entertaining young, energetic young males. And the game comes from the East Coast and grew in Indiana very, very quickly, partially because of the limited needs for resources and equipment and things like that. Maybe the cold winter weather, because it being an indoor sport, contributed as well. Now, legend says that the first ever high school basketball game that happened in Indiana was between Crawfordsville and Lafayette, the representative YMCAs at the time, which had grown and developed during the Gilded Age. But if you actually look into it a little bit, it is legend. Some more recent reports suggest that it might have been something else. But in Indiana lore, this is often considered the first game. So a couple decades later, by 1911, the Indiana High School Athletic Association, which still exists to this day and runs all of the state tournaments for all sports, organized the first ever Indiana State high school basketball tournament. And Crawfordsville, this is a very truthful, not legend, story, is often considered that small town in Indiana, pictured here on the map in the bottom left, defeated Lebanon in the first ever state title game. So a lot of the earliest roots are connected to the small town of Crawfordsville. It's a point of pride for that community to this day. And this, I would say, is kind of the thesis statement or the beginning of what Indiana basketball is going to become. In 1936, Dr. Naismith himself attended the state championship game, the teams involved, I'm blanking on at the moment, in 1936, and was quoted as saying, "This was a thrill I shall not soon forget." And from that point on, if it hadn't already, the game is going to take off into something deeply ingrained into Indiana society. And I think you have to start with the end of the season, which is that state tournament I was just talking about, which is otherwise sometimes referred to as Hoosier Hysteria, to the point that people have even written books about it. So from 1911, it's very controversial that this ended. We have our class system now, but from 1911 to 1997, the basketball state tournament crowned one sole champion, and every school, no matter small, big, private, or public, participated in this to make it extremely prestigious. So you would have all kinds of interesting matchups throughout the state tournament that wouldn't otherwise happen. Now, post 1997, they went to, based on success and student population size of schools, a 4A class system or 4-class system that crowns 4 different state champions. And a lot of old school Hoosiers still really dislike that to this day. Arguments for it are that it's more fair and equitable to the little guy. In many ways, the state tournament contributed to the culture of Indiana. This might be legend, but you believe it when someone tells you, but it might not exist quite as much in the 21st century. But if you hear stories about the state tournament in the 50s or the 60s and beyond, you will get told that small towns often shut down, whether it's for parades and pep rallies and things like that, and even businesses closing. I've heard stories from grandparents before about, a barber shop closed for sectionals on Friday night and things like that. It was a cultural event in late winter and early spring. And while Cinderella is often synonymous with any time a small town or an underachieving regular season team makes a run in a tournament, many people say that this kind of birthed the idea of Cinderella in sports. The classic path, it has altered. How many games you have to win to get through each is going to be, you have to win a sectional, then you have to win a regional, then you have to win semi-state, and then, of course, a state championship. There is the very famous phrase to Hoosiers, in 49 states, it's just basketball. but this is Indiana. I think even before Indiana Pacer games, they'll put that on the Jumbotron before starting lineups. And Hoosiers take a lot of pride in this, that basketball is done differently, whether it's 2024 or 1954. Basketball is simply done differently with massive crowds, whether top right, you can see from 1950, or even a sectional last year, sold out crowds are the norm for major basketball games in the state. Oddly enough, though, despite all of the Hoosier pride, arguably, and I wouldn't say even arguably, I think the most important cultural impact or generator to the fame and legend of Indiana high school basketball is actually via California, via Hollywood, through or via the movie Hoosiers, which came out in 1986 and is loosely based on the real story of Cinderella Milan High School, a tiny little Milan High School, winning the state championship. Now, the movie portrays Milan. They were a very small town through the fictional town of Hickory, as a bunch of kind of chumps, unsuccessful, which kind of gets away from the fact that in 1953 Milan also was a very successful team. But it kind of creates that Hollywood story of underdogs into champions. And while it did take some liberties, I would say it is very accurate, and this is why people love this film so much, in portraying small town Indiana life on the big screen, which a lot of times Hollywood isn't going to get right, especially with the so-called flyover states and the portrayal of their cultures. Because even though Hickory is fictionalized, some of the characters, whether it's the overpassionate parent or overzealous business owner trying to have a say in playing time, and people packing school board and community meetings to discuss whether a player should be allowed back on the team and things like that. Real Hoosiers, especially of a certain age, can point to very real stories that represent some of the things portrayed in Hoosiers. So it is also a big deal because it's one of the first Hollywood movies that showcase the underdog winning, which has certainly been replicated and copied with every sports movie that's came out since 1986. So takes some liberties, but its impact and description of small-town Indiana life is very, very real. Let's talk about some players, games, moments. Putting these lists together is absolutely impossible because there's 400 different answers and lists you could put together without even including anything from mine. I do think you have to start with the very legendary shot that sparked or inspired the movie Hoosiers in 1954 when Bobby Plump of that Milan team hit a buzzer beater in Hinkle Fieldhouse to beat Muncie Central, and that shot would later inspire the story of Hickory, which is based loosely on the Milan team. In 1978, due to a national coal strike, the season actually got delayed. There were some crazy moments with games during the day or without air conditioning, but the season culminated in a one-point overtime state championship, kind of an oddity in the story of Indiana. In 1982, Scott Skiles, who later played in the NBA, I had some colleagues of mine point to this as one of the most famous games, led Plymouth to a one-point victory in a classic game against Gary Roosevelt with two northern Indiana high schools in 1982. Damon Bailey, if Bobby Plump's the most famous person in Hoosiers area history, Damon Bailey's probably second. He's the all-time leading scorer in Indiana history, played his college days at IU. The all-time leading scorer in front of a crowd of over 41,000 people at the Hoosier Dome, led a comeback victory against Concord in the beginning of the 90s. You get all kinds of cool stories, too, about the remarkable talent that came through Indiana. The 2005 Marion County Tournament, that's just one county in the state, 90-plus, within Indianapolis. So much talent was in one place in one little tournament in January. Greg Oden and Mike Conley would later be drafted into the NBA, and they lost in the first round in their junior years. It was the only loss they had that entire year to Eric Gordon, who's still in the NBA, their North Central High School team in the first round. But Eric Gordon's team didn't even end up winning the county tournament because they ended up losing to Jeff Teagan Pike, who was on his way to the NBA as well. So it just shows you in certain moments in time the insane talent that this state has had. And there's other moments from the 21st century, like Luke Zeller's half-court heave to win the 3A state title for Washington, as well as high-scoring, heartbreaking games like Homestead's thrilling comeback in the final minutes against Evansville Rights in the 2015 4A state title. Which I'll have more of some of these things here in a second. The only picture Bobby Plump had for a very long time of his legendary shot didn't have him in it. There's very limited pictures, and now I think there was a painting redone of him in it that was given to him on his 80th birthday. Over here, you have the Hoosier Dome, which is famous for that Damon Bailey game that had over 40,000 people attend. My one video clip for the slides. This is Zeller. This is a great Hoosier hysteria moment, hitting the famous half-court shot in 2004. And the announcer goes crazy. The heartbreaking thing for Plymouth is they had actually just hit a thrilling, clutch, miraculous shot just moments before. But that's been kind of forgotten in time because Zeller won up to it. Excuse me with the noise. I'm not going to speak on every one of these teams, and you can make a list of 20 or 30 more. I picked out a few that both went undefeated, of course, and then ended up winning a state title. In 1956, led by the legend Oscar Robertson, Indianapolis Attucks, otherwise known as Crispus Attucks today, became the first all-black school to win any open state tournament in America. And a lot of historians actually point to this as a monumental moment and during the civil rights movement of desegregation in Indiana schools, or the promotion of that, with Attucks being all black. And that team, not only as a great basketball team, but as also a cultural shifter, is very famous in Indiana history. Old heads often like to point to the 1969 Indianapolis Washington team led by George McGinnis, who ended up playing for the ABA Pacers, as arguably the greatest team ever assembled. More younger, modern people might point to 03 Pike or 06 Lawrence North. I personally think Lawrence North, who won 3 state titles and had 2 future top 5 draft picks in the NBA in the same class to go along with the future other college players, might be the greatest. Of course, I talked about their 1 loss as juniors. They were unblemished as seniors, and I think there's a real argument that that may have been led by 7-foot Greg Oden as the best team ever, but you can make arguments for countless others. Every year since 1939, Indiana has had a Mr. Basketball, which awards a best player in the state for seniors only. You can't win as underclassmen since 1939. It is the most prestigious award in Indiana high school basketball, and a lot of legendary names are on it, like an Oscar Robertson, Rick Mount, who had famously had a Sports Illustrated cover, first of its kind for a teenage boy from the famous publication. Bobby Plump won it. Bailey, who was targeted as early as 8th grade before he even went to B&L by IU coach Bobby Knight. I just mentioned Greg Oden of college and high school fame. Tragically, his NBA career did not work out due to countless knee injuries. I myself was actually on a staff that coached Marcus Burton, who ended up winning Mr. Basketball after I left during his senior year from Penn High School up by Notre Dame. The staggering thing actually with Mr. Basketball, though, is that the list of non-winners includes a lot of future pros and wildly successful college players, so that list might be as impressive as the winners. The other thing that's shocking is that the last time a winner did not attend a major Division I, one of the Power 4 conference programs, the last time that happened was in 1996 when I was 2 years old. There are also a lot of Indiana's been richly blessed with amazing coaches that have been willing to stay at the high school level. 3 have won at least 800 games. J.R. Holmes only won with 900, still doing it. It might be his last year right now at Bloomington South, as well as Jack Kiefer of those Lawrence North teams, and then Jack Butcher from Logatee as well. So those are the only 3. I don't know if anyone's encroaching on 800. Obviously very difficult, and for all of them, it took at least 45 years coaching in the state to get to that number. This is a high fun putting this together, a hodgepodge of some Mr. Basketball winners, but also some that didn't. Alan Henderson, Rick Fox of Warsaw, I pictured a lot of them as professionals where they ended up. Eric Gordon. Larry Bird didn't win Mr. Basketball, and he's considered one of the greatest players of all time. I know people of a certain age will always talk about how great Glenn Robinson was at Purdue and Gary Roosevelt. Sean Kemp, not a Mr. Basketball winner, ended up being an NBA All-Star. And even for myself, Perry Meridian High School, which is not known as a basketball program, has not had a lot of success, has produced two people in the NBA, including Dylan Windler, who was a freshman during my senior year of high school, pictured there near the bottom left. So just the amount of talent that's came out of the state is unbelievable. Some analysis and cultural impact stuff here as well. I always struggle where to put my face on these recordings. Indiana has consistently outpunched its weight with producing professional basketball players. 196 that have played basketball, high school in this state, have took a foot, on an NBA court. And if you actually look at per capita NBA production state by state, Indiana, I think with the exception of North Carolina and maybe one other state, is always at the tippy top of any list of likelihood to produce an NBA player based on our state's population. And even beyond high school basketball, there's a lot of legend to this sport nationally. Whether it's Larry Legend, the hick from French Lick, whose story of transferring out of IU to play Indiana at Indiana State, and his legendary championship game with Magic Johnson before his career with the Celtics has gone down in Indiana lore. Even in the 1990s, when the Indiana Pacers played the New York Knicks in several NBA playoff series, the phrase Hicks versus Knicks was often used. And I know Hicks was meant to be demeaning, but I think Indiana and Hoosier fans really embrace that as, hey, we're not the playground city slicker basketball players. We're the high school shoot on a hoop in a peach basket in farm country kind of thing, which put kind of Indiana high school basketball culture on the national stage in the 1990s. You also have situations where there's pressure for recruiting and college attendance due to the strength of Indiana high school basketball. Scott May on the left, who had a great career as an Indiana basketball player, and his son, sticking around in Bloomington, attended Bloomington North High School. Sean, that you can see pictured there on the right. It was controversial at the time when he decided to commit to play to North Carolina, where he had a great career, instead of his hometown Indiana Hoosiers. And there's all kinds of examples like that where there's sort of expectations of loyalty. This has kind of gone away a little bit in recent years, of players sticking around to represent their local colleges and universities instead of going for perhaps more glamorous options out of the state. Speaking of in-state and glamour, Indiana takes a lot of pride in having some of the biggest, most obnoxiously sized high school gyms in the nation. And whether it's Southport, Elkhart, Seymour, or Newcastle in the top right, which is considered the biggest high school basketball gym in the country, Indiana loves to brag about its gym size. And while they don't fill up quite like they used to, there are still examples of great sectional and regional games that will still be absolutely jam-packed in attendance to see some of the best players in the state. It's a really special thing, and I love how all the gyms have unique personalities to them and design structures and things like that. There are very few cookie-cutter gyms, if you will, in the state. I have to mention girls basketball, and I feel bad that it's so under-featured often when you talk about this subject, and it's not fair, but it is true that girls basketball has lagged behind in its cultural importance to the state, partially because it got started so much later, post-Title IX in 1976, but the game, just like the boys in the early 1900s, did take off and explode in the 1980s and 90s. And just like the boys, there has been a lot of notable success and people that have gone to a national level through Indiana women's basketball. Some of Indiana's Miss Basketball winners, which was created, I believe, when the sport was sanctioned in '76, include Sharon Versa and Katie Geralds, who have both returned, I believe, to alma maters to coach the Purdue women's team. Stephanie White is now a national commentator for the WNBA. And speaking of which, Skylar Diggins and Jackie Young are two very talented and active and successful WNBA players right now. Jackie Young, I believe, has won 2 championships with the Las Vegas Aces, and she came from small little Princeton in southern Indiana. So yes, the story and the history and the Hoosier hysteria is not quite there for girls, but their success and ability to produce college and professional players has sort of matched what the boys are doing. And perhaps with Caitlin Clark's emergence on the Indiana Fever, I wouldn't be surprised to see girls basketball take another leap in the decades to come. So to wrap this up, a lot of people might mention that Indiana is not in the glory days it once was with Indiana basketball. And even with that, the boys basketball state finals this past year saw an over in their 2 sessions attendance of 20,000 people at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. But there are challenges that are starting to emerge that kind of take away from some of the romanticism of the sport, whether it's the travel basketball of AAU influencing or kind of infiltrating with AAU coaches involved in staffs. A lot of the most talented players in the state are now transferring to these prep academies that are non-associated with the IHSAA. There's trickle down with personal branding now and money getting involved in high school sports, or if it hasn't happened yet, it's going to, as well as a lot of kids shifting and hopping schools and towns based on playing time with not so subtle recruiting happening, which I think all coaches would tell you that these are ongoing issues moving forward. With that said, I would say my conclusion to all of this, though, is that this sport, for both boys and girls, the foundation, the building blocks, the history, the lore, the legend of Hoosiers, that stuff is so ingrained and so in place in the state of Indiana that I don't think the sport is going anywhere anytime soon, at least in my lifetime, and I hope it never does. The tradition's rich. There's still sellouts at high school basketball games, and it's one of the most important things to the state of Indiana. So hope you enjoy. I'll quickly but show the works cited page that you'll see in my downloaded PDF that I used to put this all together. So thank you for watching and have a great day.